Alright guys, welcome back. Okay, today we're going to make a cyanotype. In a previous video that I made, I showed you how to mix the chemistry from the raw powdered chemicals, and today we're going to make a print with that. So I've got my two chemicals, the potassium ferrocyanide and the ferric ammonium citrate, and I've also got a negative that I've made on transparency. You can kind of see it that way if I put it on white paper. Now, the negative, there's a lot of different ways you can make negatives. You can do something called cliché vert, where you're drawing on glass or transparency paper or acetate. You can do oiled paper negative, or you can print them off onto an inkjet transparency. And there's a lot of different kinds of transparency. So I'm going to show you a couple of what I like to use. A popular brand is called Pictorico or Pictorico. I never can really decide how you're supposed to say it. And that's a really good one. I also like this one called Arista. This is from freestylephoto.biz, freestylephoto.biz. Make sure that you get the 7 mil and not the 5 mil. I think the 5 mil doesn't dry very fast, and it doesn't get the density that you want from your transparency. I also have found that brands like 3M and other brands that you can find at like office supply stores, they don't quite give you the density in your black areas that are going to end up being your highlights. I don't know if it's because they're made maybe more for corporate like slideshows or whatever, but they really don't give you the density in the ink. So use one that is made for photography, Pictorico or Arista, or actually I like ones that are marketed for screen printing. For some reason they're a lot cheaper. So if you go on Amazon and just type in, or just Google it, just type in inkjet transparency for screen printing. For some reason, the stuff that's marketed for screen printers, I think, is a lot cheaper than the stuff that's marketed towards photographers. And that's just something I found, so a little tip. And I don't even know what the brand is, but it comes in this box, and this is 8.5 by 11, and I've cut it down to a half size, and I've made a small negative here. Okay, and I'm going to show you a whole other thing on making negatives and how I do what I do in Photoshop to do the levels. So assuming you have your negative, you have your cyanotype chemistry ready to go, then you just need some paper, and I am using Arches Platine paper. I also really like Fabriano Artistico, and Hahnemühle Platinum Rag is a really fantastic paper, but experiment with different kinds of papers. Most watercolor papers are going to work pretty well for you, and same thing with printmaking papers, but just experiment. Some work better than others. Okay, and you know what? I've actually seen these done on wood, on fabric, and even on ceramic. Cyanotype is a really versatile process, so there's lots of different things you could try it on. Just experiment and play. Okay, so I've got my gloves. I'm going to put some goggles on. I've got my chemicals. I've got a little graduated cylinder, and I'm going to do the coating with some cotton balls. And these are kind of small cotton balls, so I've just got a wad of 2 or 3 of them here. You can also use any kind of brush, a foam brush, a hockey brush, any kind of brush you want. Or some people use a glass rod and kind of push it around. There's different ways to coat, but I like the cotton balls because it's cheap, it's disposable, and they're just really easy to find, and you're not using a brush up that you might want to use for something else. Okay, so here we go. I've got a pretty small piece. So how much cyanotype to use? Well, you need to have an equal ratio of the A and B solutions. So decide how much you're gonna need total. And I think for the size that I have here, I need about 3 milliliters, not much at all. Okay, I'm gonna round that up to 4 just to make my measuring a little bit easier, and it's hard to measure a half milliliter even on this graduated cylinder. So I'm just gonna measure out. I'm just going to drop this out, and this is why I like these shampoo bottles, because you can just drop it out really easily. In fact, if you don't have a graduated cylinder, you could just count the drops and just do an equal number of drops until you have what you think is about going to cover it. I think for a paper this size, I want about a dime-sized puddle. So however much you think that's going to be. In fact, I don't even think I need 4 now that I think about it. I'm going to go with 2 total. So 1 milliliter each of A and B, and that should suffice. So I'm just going to be real careful. I'm dropping it out. And that's 1 milliliter of that. And enough to make this go to 2. Okay. So one reason I like these real tall, skinny, graduated cylinders is because it makes it easy to kind of mix this up. Just give it a little bit of a shake. And I wish I had a paper towel sitting next to me. I'm just going to wipe it on this fabric. That's what this yucky table mat is for anyway. Okay, so now I'm just going to pour it into the center. So I have a method that I use for coating the paper. What I like to do is pour the chemistry in the center, push it out to the ends like that, and then I'm going to start at the top edge and go all the way across, and I liken it to mowing a yard, where you want to go all the way across. You don't stop short. Okay, go all the way across and overlap your passes so that you're not leaving streaks. All right, and you want to do it as quickly as you can without being sloppy. So I'm going to go from top to bottom. I'm going to go from left to right. I'm going to go bottom to top, and then I'm going to go right to left. And that, when I'm done, should give me a nice even coat. All right, so here's what that's going to look like. Just pour that right in the middle. That's a little more than I need, even with just only 2 milliliters. So that's another reason why I like the cotton balls, because they're going to soak up a lot of that excess. All right, and then I'll go this way, just kind of whatever feels natural. And now I'm going to go bottom to top, and then left to right. So you're basically moving across the paper in all 4 directions. Down, left, bottom, and then right. Okay, it doesn't have to be in that order. Again, just whatever feels natural. Okay, and you can see that the paper is now this bright yellow chartreuse green color, and that's exactly what we want. If your chemistry is getting a little spent, or if you've mixed it, pre-mixed it so that it's the working solution and it's a little bit old, then when you put it on the paper, it's going to be more of a blue color because it's already starting to expose. So unexposed chemistry is this green color. And you'll notice I'm doing this in just regular fluorescent light. Fluorescent light doesn't put out a lot of UV, so it's not causing me a lot of problems. Now, and obviously because I'm trying to do a demonstration. Now, once I have this coated, I would probably dry it in the dark, turn the lights off, put it in, or even just dim light is ideal. But this is just fine. It's no big deal. All right, we'll throw that away. And so, how to dry the paper? Let me take my gloves off here. Oh, I also should mention the way that I've taped the paper is so that I have a nice even border. If you wanted to, and you'll see a lot of cyanotypes and calotypes and all kinds of alternative process prints that are done this way, if you want to, just tape the corners. Just put a little piece of tape on the corners, and then when you coat it, you'll have more of an uneven edge here, maybe like, call it like a painterly kind of edge, and some people really like that. Sometimes I do. A lot of times I do, but for this one I just wanted to make a nice even straight edge, mostly because the image has a lot of geometric lines and there's a lot of angles, and I thought that that edge would fit better. So I'm going to take this tape off. And you can see now the edge that I made. That's always really satisfying. Take the tape off like that. Okay, and I'm going to blow dry it. So you could also just let it air dry. It would probably take about 20 minutes. Again, it might be a good idea to do that in the dark. But I'm going to blow dry it, and I'll show you a couple little things. You want to kind of blow dry from the underneath, and I'm going to tell you this now before the blow dryer comes on because I don't want to yell. So I'm going to blow dry a little bit from underneath, and you'll see me kind of doing this where I'll hold it like this and blow dry from this end, and then I'll kind of turn it and do like this. And what I'm doing is just blow so it dries evenly, and also I'm holding the blow dryer here so that the air is flowing underneath and around, and it just dries more evenly that way. Okay, so I'm going to blow dry this a little bit. I won't make you sit here and watch me do the whole thing, but when we come back, I'm going to show you how to put the negative on there and put it in glass, and we'll take it outside and make an exposure. Okay. All right, so my paper is dry, and make sure that the paper is dry. It can cause a problem if it's not completely dry. So one thing you can do is to check, to kind of press your hand on the back of the paper, and if you feel any coolness or dampness, then you need to blow dry it some more. If it's not totally dry, then there's a chance that the emulsion will just rinse out when we do the processing after the exposure. Okay, so I'm ready to go. In a lot of my videos, when I'm doing these exposures, I'm just using plain old sheets of glass, and you can certainly do that with this. A sheet of glass or a picture frame, make sure that the glass is not UV, or you can use plexiglass. But for this demo, I'm going to use this fancy contact printer, and this is one that I got from Bostic & Sullivan, and I'll show you the advantages of this. So the way to use this is I'm just going to kind of push and twist these latches, lift that out, and there's glass in there, and I'm going to put the negative with the ink side down. And I don't know if I think you can hopefully tell in the camera, this side has kind of a milkier color, and you can see this is where the ink is. So I want the ink side down, and I talked about that too in my video about negatives. All right, so I want the ink side down. I'm just going to kind of get it straight on there the way I want it. Make sure it's just the way you like it. All right, and then my trick for getting it in there without shifting it is I'll kind of hold it with my thumbs underneath like that, and then I can just, if I need to, I can shift it more, and then I just kind of place it down like that, hold it in place while I get half of this, and then set it in there, because you don't want things shifting around. Okay, and then that just locks. Now the main advantages of this, and you can see the image ready to be exposed. Okay, the main advantages of this are that you really get nice, even, flush pressure all the way across, so you know that every part of the image is going to have good contact. But honestly, I think the biggest advantage to this is that during the exposure, we can lift one of these edges, and we can look and see, you know, how the exposure is doing. We don't see anything yet, but we can do that without getting the negative and paper off register. Okay, so that's all ready to go. That's in there, and let's go outside and we'll make an exposure in the sun. We'll talk about that there. All right, so I'm ready to make my exposure. I'm going to find a nice sunny spot, and I'm going to set this out here, and I'll try to get to where you can see a little better. And if we just watch this for a little bit, we're not going to watch the entire exposure, but we should start to see that green emulsion turn a little bit of a blue-green as it's exposing to the sun. And it's the iron in the emulsion that's having a chemical reaction. So you can see it starting to get darker. It changes slowly and subtly, but definitely noticeable as you're sitting here watching it. So, you know, when you're exposing in the sun, no matter what process you're doing, there's going to be there's the variables. What time of year it is, how much sun there is, how hot it is outside, what the humidity is. So the way that I tell by looking at the exposure whether it's done or not is I actually try to overexpose a little bit, and I'm going to wait until the emulsion on the edge here. I like to be able to see a little bit of the emulsion there so that I can kind of watch it. And what I'm looking for is I want it to bleach out a little bit and start to solarize a little bit. So I'm going to turn the camera off, and we'll come back when it's done, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So it's been about 5 minutes, and the image is much, much darker here and starting to wash out a little bit, almost like a faded denim kind of look, I guess. I want to turn this thing over and show you what I was talking about with the flaps back here. I can take a look at this and see how the image is coming out, and you can see that some of it, you know, you can see how the image is coming out, and it looks pretty good to me. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take this in, and we'll wash it and rinse it, and I'll show you how that goes. All right, so we're back inside with the Cyanotype, and I'm just going to take it out of the printing frame. Pardon my clumsiness trying to do this with one hand here while I Okay, so let's see what it looks like now. All right, that's what it looks like now. We can clearly see the image. And if you'll notice, a lot of these yellow areas in the highlights that you can still see unexposed emulsion. So let's take it over here to the sink. And I'm just gonna put it in a tray and turn some water on. I'm just using cold water. Now, when you rinse a cyanotype, you wanna try to keep the faucet off of just like pounding on one part of the cyanotype. You'll notice that I'm moving pretty aggressively. Don't just put a little bit in there and kind of just move it around like that. That's not gonna cut it. You really need to wash that stuff out and just keep going until the water runs clear. I'm changing the water often. You can't be overly concerned with conserving water. I know that sounds bad, but you're just gonna use some water with this. Okay, so once I've got the yellow out, and I can see some of my highlights washing out more than I think I'd like, but I'm just gonna put enough water to cover the print, set it off over here, turn the water off. And for this next step, I'm gonna use hydrogen peroxide, just regular old hydrogen peroxide. So because the emulsion is made out of iron, the peroxide is going to oxidize the iron and make it turn a bright blue. This is kind of a cool part. This is my favorite part of the cyanotype. So I'm just going to put a little drop in there. You don't need much at all. And then you can already see the specks. And I'm just going to kind of wash this around, rinse it around until the whole thing turns that dark blue, and that's that really beautiful dark cyanotype blue that you want. Really, really rich blue in your shadows. You can see how dense those shadow areas are. Okay, so now that I've got the peroxide in there, once the whole print turns blue, then the peroxide has done what it's going to do. So I'm going to turn the water back on, and I'm going to rinse this print for another few minutes. I can still see a tiny bit of yellow in my highlights, so I'm just going to keep rinsing. You want to be a little careful that you don't wash out all your highlights, so watch the highlight areas. Right there where the faucet is, right there is a highlight area. So I'm kind of keeping my eye on that. Man, I'm really sorry about the shakiness of the camera. Okay, I'm going to keep going on this, but all I'm going to do after this is just blot it dry with some paper towels, and that's it. You're done. You can do some toning, you can hand color the image, but that essentially is it. You're done making the print if you want to be. Okay, we'll set this off to the side. We'll take a little closer look. And that's my cyanotype. All right. Happy printing.